State, and I think people were still trying to get the feel of Jack Hartman at that point in time. KU was very good in that era as well. They had great players, and so you had these two incredible teams in the Big Eight that battled head-to-head. But that was a very good team that showed a lot of K-Staters that we're going to be okay with Jack Hartman as our coach.
That was my freshman year. I played junior varsity and varsity. That was a fine-tuned machine. And it was a team that played together.
Before season started, we always would pick up games up in the old gym. And one time, a lot of different people would come out and play. And one time, I was 6'10" at the time and had come off of high school, leading rebounder, set records in my high school for rebounding. Won it for a rebound in one of these practice games. And when I think I just about had the ball, all of a sudden I'm flying underneath the basket against a wall, and I turn around and here is Steve Mitchell and Nick Pino on the same, both going for the rebound. And I was this little skinny guy from high school, and Nick Pino had just graduated, and Steve Mitchell, who was a huge man. That's when I realized I better gain some weight. This is a very difficult game to play in the Big Eight back then.
Well, I remember watching Steve growing up. Great center, really kind of I thought the key to those teams that won back-to-back Big Eight titles in the early 70s.
He was just thick and wide, and again, a lot of teams in the Big Eight at that time had a hard time matching up with Steve Mitchell because they just didn't have a guy that size to play in the middle.
The Big Eight at that time, it really came down. It was Kansas State and Kansas for a long time. Then Missouri, probably was the first team to step up and invest more in basketball, and Norm Stewart had a lot to do with that. And their teams were very, hard-nosed and very competitive, and weren't shy about making contact in the paint.
It was an intense rivalry because Norm Stewart taught them to play physical basketball, as most Missouri teams always do. And I think this was one of those nights that the K-State team decided not to step back. I mean, somebody was going to put a hard foul on them, or they were going to go in tough, and K-State was going to come back. And they played intense. And boy, there were people like Ernie Kushner and Lon Kruger and Steve Mitchell that said, we aren't stepping back, we're going for this. And they did that night.
There were so many guys that came of age. Bob Chipman, who became a great coach in his own right at Washburn, when he first came there, he came from a junior college, I think out of Florida. And he couldn't hit a free throw to save his life. And they were in a big game down in Oklahoma. And at the end of the game, Bob Chipman, who'd been atrocious at the free throw line for a long time, hit, I think, 4 straight big free throws at the end of the game. And you could see him grow up as a player. From that time on, he was a good free throw shooter and a very valuable player. But I think the thing about that team, they had a lot of good basketball minds on that team as players, the guys who did become coaches or could have become good coaches. That was just, they were a very smart, intelligent team, and that was a Jack Hartman kind of a team. Bob Chipman had come a star also from junior college to K-State, but he molded it right in with Lon Kruger, and the two of them talked about unselfish, and that discipline, I think, just was accepted by most of the other players. Larry Williams, Hobbs, as we nicknamed him, Steve Mitchell, Gene McVeigh. I mean, these were all just good players that had always played team ball together. Wherever they'd played before had played team and came together, and it's very easy to play together.
Lonnie would always pick it up when we needed it. Bud Kushner was explosive scorer. Larry Williams, tremendous offensive player. Steve Mitchell, incredible offensive post player. I think my role was basically to move the ball around and stay out of people's way. And Lonnie, we knew what Lonnie could do.
I remember once Mike said that Lon Kruger was really a student of the game. It couldn't have been said better. He was really a student of the game. He was the type of player that got everybody involved, and he excelled at the same time.
The game in '73 in Ahern, when we came back to beat KU late, we were down 13 with 5 minutes to go, and actually that was the year they experimented with the 35-second clock. And if they had not had the 35-second clock, KU would have held it, and we wouldn't have had a chance to come back. But they had the clock, they had to shoot it, and we ended up coming back from, I think, 13 down with 5 to go to win. And then there was a collision late in that ball game between myself and Cavisto, and I think Irv Brown is the official, and he's got a radio show, talk show in Denver today, and he always calls every year to relive that and reassure, so I could reassure him that he made the right call.
That was a team that just played very well. It was probably one of Jack Hartman's best coaching jobs ever. I don't think anybody expected him to win the conference that year.
We were one of 16 in the nation chosen to go and play. All of a sudden, you were playing guys that you didn't have as many notes on. It was tougher to get recruiting tapes on them.
They didn't give us a chance. Like I said, they had the nation's leading scorer. They had big kids that could run and jump and play, and they were fast and they were skillful. But what they didn't know, and I realized a year or two later, what we had that Southwest Louisiana didn't have, we had continuity. They freelanced and played a lot of individual basketball. And that's where we beat them. We beat them with skill. We beat them with smartness. And for me, at that time, that was the biggest win of my life.
It was a well-rounded team. It wasn't probably the most athletic team ever in college basketball, but it may have been the best team as far as playing hard and playing together. And, you know, it was just so much fun. And it just every game, you just knew what was going to happen. There was no surprises. You knew that if you were open, you knew if a guy was open, you knew that we were running this play and this was going to happen. And you know, it was just Coach Hartman just worked his magic that year, and there was no surprises. Everything was totally in sync, and it took a great team to beat us, and I think we finally ran into one.